Welcome back to YB Tonight. I'm your host, Marie Miller. We've got Hannah McBride here to tell us a little more about what she does here on campus. How are you doing, Hannah?
Well, thanks, Marie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a little more about what exactly your job is on campus? Like just starting off hot with that question.
Yes. I often say my job title is the worst way to start, but I will start with that. So my title is officially the Coordinator for Interpersonal Violence, Prevention, Education, and Response.
Okay.
What that means is that I do 3 different branches of work on campus. The first is with policy, the second is with education and training, and then the third is an individual support for students who have experienced or have been accused of something harmful, whether that's abuse or maybe sometimes like manipulation, anything harmful in a relationship or an experience.
Okay.
So cheerful.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It sounds like a thrill. And I know you work very closely with Title IX. What do you feel that students should be able to know?
About Title IX
Yes.
specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Title IX is one of the pieces of legislation that we follow as an institution of higher education to make sure students are aware of their rights and their options in case something happens or goes wrong in a relationship. So when I think about Title IX, I want students to be aware that they're in control of a process. And I think a lot of times what shows up on the news makes it seem like there isn't a process for students to follow, or it can be really hard to know you can report something and get help even if you don't want it to become an investigation, for example, if you just want to share and get support. I think often it feels intimidating to do that, or you're not sure that that's a possibility, depending on your circumstances. Title IX gives a lot of options for students and makes sure they stay in control. So I would love for students to know that.
Mm-hmm. And they reach out to you to start that process?
They do,
Okay.
or sometimes, probably every week, one of the ways I get connected with students is through someone else the student is close to.
Mm-hmm.
So a student might disclose that they had a bad experience on a date, or that they're experiencing something that feels like stalking. They might connect with a faculty member or a coach, a roommate, or an RD, and then that person reaches out to me and says, I think this student could use some help or some support, and then I get in touch with the student.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tasks do you perform at your job on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, I am always having a meeting of some kind with a student, whether that's a first time meeting someone to give them their options or to talk through a process and what they've chosen for a next step. Almost always I'm meeting with a student that I'm in further conversation with. Sometimes I mentor students around their relationships if they want help learning how to set boundaries or maybe pursuing a different pattern in their relationships. So always student meetings. And then I'm often doing some kind of writing or presentation preparation. I do a lot of our education and training for our compliance around Title IX and then other pieces of legislation on campus. So I work closely with compliance. I also sit on a few different committees on campus, no surprise at Messiah. So I work closely with our Gender Concerns Committee and our Inclusive Excellence Council, which are 2 of my favorite places to be involved, as well as SAGE, our Sexuality and Gender Education Initiative.
And how did you come into this role on campus?
Great question. Through the back door. I never set out to be involved in sexual violence prevention and education work. But I had a lot of experience working at a former institution, just being connected and supporting students. I got more and more involved in the policy work. And Messiah was granted actually a grant from the Department of Justice about 6 years ago now. It was a massive grant for campuses across the United States and its territories to better respond to sexual violence, to stalking, to abusive relationships. And Messiah was the first Christian university to apply for and receive that grant. Under that grant, they were required to hire somebody to run it and to run the programming. And that's how I got connected to Messiah. Someone referred me to the job, and I interviewed, and it was a good fit.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. I know you mentioned it a little bit with your meetings with students, but what kind of things do you do with students on campus?
Yeah, great question. It's actually one of my favorite parts of my job because I'm highly introverted And I also really love connecting with people, so it gives me a reason to connect with people in a really deep way right away. Skip the small talk, and we're usually talking about what can be helpful or supportive for a student to know or to choose in that moment. A lot of times I'm meeting students not on their best days, sometimes their worst days. And I meet with both students that are reporting and students that have been reported. And sometimes that can be confusing to people. As a confidential resource, similar to a counselor, I meet with both. And the first thing I'm always doing is providing options and saying, here's what's available to you. Essentially, here are the things you already pay for as a college student. Does any of this sound like it would be helpful for you? Do you want to change class sections? Do you want to change parking or housing assignments? Would it be helpful for you to pursue a mediation model? Do you need a no contact order? Is there an off-campus resource that you need for medical or mental health reasons? There's a whole slew of things. Sometimes that ends up in an investigation process. Sometimes it means we work with the police. Sometimes it means we meet once and we choose ways to support that don't look like that at all.
What would you recommend for people possibly looking to get into this sort of career?
I would actually recommend doing some research about jobs that are open that include words like Title IX, inclusivity, gender equity, because the landscape of this field is changing dramatically and very quickly. Every time there's a new presidential administration, Title IX is essentially rewritten. A lot of people don't know that, so I think every 4 years or so, there's a shift for institutions to rework their process, and that often means hiring in a different way. So I would suggest to do some research about jobs that are available and then find someone to sit down and interview or talk through what does it mean, what does this look like, what are the challenges.
All right, and to wrap this up, could you tell everyone how they can reach you if they have further questions or they just want to talk?
Happily. My email address is one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me. That's hmcbride@messiah.edu. I do have an office extension for people who love talking on the phone. That's extension 2608 on campus. And I'm located in Old Main on the first floor, so you're always welcome to stop by or set up an appointment. I'm always happy to get coffee, or you can come meet in my office.
Very nice, and thank you for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
And thanks again for tuning in to YB Tonight. A huge thank you to Sarah Hartway for her lovely performance and interview with Hannah McBride for sitting down with us. For myself and all our reporters, have a great night, and we'll see you next week.